fool, idiot, stupid, filthy, worthless. What are those? They're just words, right? That's all they are. Just words. Or are they? Were you impacted by what I just said? I didn't say it to you or at you. I just said the words. But there's something about the power that words have. It's as if God set out from the very beginning to show us this. That was on the negative side. But when you look at creation, what do you see? When you look at the account of God bringing everything into existence, He speaks, and what happens? Good things come about. Let there be light, and there was light. What would we do without light? And everything else that was created except for man, man was the one thing that He created, it's seemingly from the text, with His hands. But everything else was created by His word. He spoke and good things came into being. And yet the words I spoke a little while ago, we hear those kinds of things a lot in life, don't we? Words that have the power to hurt and to harm. I think one of the reasons they seem to have such power is because of the fragility, if you will, of life and of ourselves. If you think about it, it doesn't take any skill whatsoever to criticize. It doesn't take any skill whatsoever to tear something down or to damage it. I can damage things really easily. I don't even have to try. I remember, anybody remember that truck I used to have? White Ford F-150 extended cab. Oh, I love that truck. I didn't have it 2 weeks, and I backed into one of these posts out here. And I looked at it and I said, my truck. It wasn't a new truck, but it was my truck. And it didn't have a dent in it until I backed into that post. You see, we can damage things without even trying. And sometimes that's the way it works with our words. We hurt people, and in the process, we hurt ourselves. Because when you hurt somebody else, some of that damage always comes back on you. Words are powerful. Words have the potential to do great harm. But what else is true? Words have the potential to do infinite good. How do we know this? Because it was Jesus who said, go into all the world and do what? Preach the gospel. Is there a better word in the universe than the gospel of Jesus Christ? I think not. And how does Jesus say that word's to spread? By my mouth and by yours. We go into the world and we tell the world about Jesus Christ. Now, sometimes you won't have opportunities to talk to people about Jesus because they won't allow it. But you always have opportunity to say words that build up. You always have the opportunity to say words of kindness, to say words of encouragement. We've always got that opportunity. And we always have this kind of power to do good with what comes out of our mouth. The text that I've got my New Testament open to is Matthew chapter 12. And I know we've talked about this before, but I don't know if we can talk about it too much. This is where Jesus, talking about the things that he has been told, things that have been said to him, he says this in verse 33, Matthew chapter 12 and verse 33, either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad, for the tree is known by its fruit. Is he talking about trees? He's not talking about trees. He's talking about me, and he's talking about you, and he's talking about our hearts. Look what he says. You brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak what is good? For the mouth speaks out of that which fills the heart. Is it possible for me to be judged and come through it all right? Now, of course, you got to have the blood of Jesus, yes, but even as Christians, I might say especially as Christians, the words of our mouth ought to be the very thing that justify us in the end, what we say. What was it I read somewhere? I think I wrote it down. I'd like to take credit for it, but I'm not that smart. What did this guy say? I thought I wrote it down. Oh, yeah, here it is. Thomas Fuller said this. I don't know who Thomas Fuller is, but I saw his name at the end of the quote, and I want to give him credit. Somebody knows who Thomas Fuller is. The Lord knows who Thomas Fuller is. And his mom might be listening, and his mom knows who he is. If I tell a lie, I will answer for it. But if I tell the truth, it will answer for me. I like that. Do you see the difference between the two? We can always go on the negative side with what we say, but to go on the positive side, that's where we want to go, and that's where God always goes, and that's where Jesus directs us when he talks to us about this. He's not saying these things about the fruit in the heart to condemn us or make us feel bad. He's letting us know, if you want to put something out that's good, this is where you got to start. And we know that's true. You've got to start with your heart. Start with what goes down deep into you, with what you are thinking, with what you're spending time with. What was it that the apostle said when he wrote to the church at Corinth in chapter 15 and verse 33? Now this is in the context of people in the church who stopped believing in the resurrection. The reason was they were hanging out with the wrong people. And so Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 15:33, evil companions corrupt good, see, you know it. That's such a solid truth that you hear it a couple of times and you've got it. You just hold on. You know that's true. Who do you hang out with? Do the people you hang out with tend to make your speech richer, better, fuller? Do they lift your words and your thoughts to the point where things that you say after having been with them are things that you know you'd be proud to say in the presence of the Father? Those are the kind of friends we need. But I'm not talking just about the warm bodies we spend time with in the way of friends. I'm talking about the friends that influence us by way of television and movies. Those are companions as well, are they not? And when you watch TV, I hate to bring it to you, kids, all TV is educational TV. Did I ruin it for you? Oh man, I don't want to watch educational TV. Well, too bad, it's all educational. Guess what about every movie? Every movie is an educational movie. Every book you read is an educational book. Even the fantasy stuff, even Lord of the Rings, even Harry Potter, even what's the stuff people are reading these days? It's all educational. It all influences, it all impacts us. Whatever you're doing on the internet, that's influencing the way we think and the way we talk and the way we write. All of these things do. And whatever comes out of us, whether it comes from our mouth or comes from the end of our fingers, or we're talking over the phone, we're texting, those are the things that Jesus is addressing here, and it all needs to come from the heart. Actually, it all does come from the heart. There are several passages in Scripture that I want us to look at that have to do with the things we say. The next one I want to go to is Psalm chapter 19. And you may be familiar with Psalm 19, the first couple of verses, because this is a pretty well-known text. Psalm 19. This is what the psalmist says in the beginning of Psalm 19. The heavens, what are they doing? They are telling of the glory of God. Their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. Every time you look up into the heavens, God is talking to you. Those heavens are talking back and telling you of the glory of God. They're telling you about the work of his hands. Verse 2, day to day, it says, pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There's no, what's it say in verse 3? No speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their utterances to the end of the world. In them he has placed a tent for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of its chamber, and rejoices as a strong man to run its course. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, and its circuit to the other end of them, and there's nothing hidden from its heat. The Word of God brought all these things he's talking about into existence, and they are presently declaring his glory and his radiance and his power and his might and his wisdom. They speak to us. Now, he talks about the law of the Lord in verses 7 and following. And we sing this song, the law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. What is his law? Those are his words that teach us and train us how to live and how to think and how to behave. That's his law. But he gets down to the end of the chapter, and this is what I want us to think about for ourselves especially. Verse 14, what's he say? Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart. You see how they come together again, just like Jesus said? The meditation of your heart, whatever you hold in your heart, whatever you treasure in your heart, whatever your heart spends time on, that's what's going to come out of your mouth. And so David has written this 1,000 years before Jesus came in the flesh. But it was the truth that Jesus gave him. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Well, you talk about a challenge. What do we do at the beginning of the new year? We usually make revolutions. We come up with things. Well, I'm going to do this better this year. Here's one I want to encourage you in. Make deliberate use of your words to do good. We know we are to preach the gospel to every creature as we have opportunity or as we make opportunity. We know that. It's almost like that's a given. And why wouldn't we do that? As one person asked, if you had the cure to cancer, wouldn't you give that to everybody? If you've got the cure to death and eternal damnation, wouldn't you give that to everyone? I don't know, it's not the same, because people would recognize a cure for cancer because they think in terms of the flesh, and anything that attacks the flesh, well, they want to get rid of that. But the spirit, we understand there's an obligation there. We understand when we're talking about God, we're talking about the one who created us and who has a right to tell us how we're supposed to live. And we know there's an obligation that's going to change the way that I live, change the way that I talk, change the way that I think, change the things that I watch on TV and the movies I go to and the books I read and what I do on the computer. All that's going to change and come under subjection to the will of the God who spoke everything into existence by the word of his power and tells us, use your words for good. We know that's true. And so it's not an exact parallel, but it's still a real parallel. Several passages. If you want to read through Proverbs on your own sometime, you want to read through the Psalms, you'll find all kinds of things about the words of our mouth. But here's just a couple, just to give you a flavor of what's in there. Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 19. This is one of my favorites because it's such a great warning for me. This is what it says in Proverbs 10:19. When there are many words, transgression is unavoidable, but he who restrains his lips is wise. Well, I'm a preacher. I'm supposed to talk a lot. But here's the deal. I think it was Plato who said, the wise man speaks because he has something to say. The fool speaks because he has to say something. There's a difference. Solomon warns us, in the multitude of words, there's not going to be any lack for sin. In other words, Marty, don't just let your mouth run. What's that old saying? I used to think it was so cool. Make sure your brain is engaged before you put your mouth in gear. And maybe according to what Jesus says, we ought to amend that to say, make sure your heart is engaged before putting your mouth in gear. And actually, from what Jesus said, we know your mouth is already engaged to your heart. And whatever comes out of your mouth. And no matter what you have said in the past, isn't it marvelous that God gives us the power, the personal power within ourselves to change that from here on out? And I'm not talking necessarily, usually when we talk about speech, we think, oh, bad word, 4-letter words, we can't say those words. Well, okay, yeah, sure. We don't want to use words that just in and of themselves show people that we're base, because we're not base, we're not in the gutter, we're not down low. We want our speech to be as high as it can possibly be. But it's not just the individual words we use, though it is those. It's also the topics of conversation. And sometimes it's the jokes we tell. And boy, I've lived that one out because I really like a good joke. But sometimes you'll hear a joke, and it's the kind of joke you think, well, you know, the old joke, well, I can't use that in a sermon. Well, if you can't use it in a sermon, you really shouldn't use it anywhere. Really? Isn't that about the truth? And it's not just jokes and topics of conversation, but it's things we call gossip. And I know if I say it, it's not really gossip, right? Isn't that the way we think of it? If it's coming, that's not gossip. I got something I need to tell you, and this is for your own good, and this will help you. This will be beneficial, and you need to shut up. That's really what we need to do. If you got to explain what you're going to say, you better be really careful with it. What's that? Somebody said, strong trees have grown because a squirrel buried a nut and forgot about it. And you think about that with regard to gossip. You get that little tidbit of gossip that's, oh man, this is a good one, I can't wait to tell, fill in the blank. Bury it. Forget about it. Put it away from you. If what you've got isn't something that's going to tend to do somebody good, when you retell it, you just need to hush. Forget about it. Some things just need to not be said. I even tell young couples when we're going through premarital counseling, I say there's a word you need to just put out of your vocabulary. That word is divorce. And it's interesting how if you just decide I'm not going to ever say that word, then the thought goes with it. Just put that out of your mind. Don't ever allow yourself to say that. You can do that. That's the power we have to train ourselves, to train our heart. It's fantastic what we can do with our words. It's marvelous. And I'm not talking about me, a trained minister of the gospel. I'm talking about you. Every single one of us, we have the same power to train ourselves to speak the kinds of things that lift people up. And tell me we don't need some lifting up in this world. Sometimes it's just a positive spirit that you convey with your good morning when you say it with a smile. And I feel bad sometimes because I'll walk through a bunch of people and I might speak to one or two, but I won't speak to everybody. And it kind of weighs on me. Well, I didn't say hi to everybody. Well, all right. But say hi to who you can and say it with a positive spirit. It's not just about that, but it is about that. There's a lot of things that we need to learn about the way we speak. This is what Solomon also says in Proverbs chapter 17. And you've heard this one just in a little bit of different light. Even a fool, when he does what? When he keeps silent, is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he's considered prudent. Now see, the joke's on me because I just read that and I got to go keep on talking. Even the fool's considered wise when he holds his peace. Isn't that the truth? It's the truth. And just a little farther down in chapter 18, Verse 4, this is what Solomon says. The words of a man's mouth are deep waters. What does that mean? The words of a man's mouth are deep waters. I wish there was another verse that explained that one. But what do we think about when we think about deep water? You ever heard somebody use the expression, oh, we're in the deep end of the pool now? What's that mean? Well, that means, oh, this is more serious stuff. This is for the adults. This is for the people who really know how to swim. That's what deep waters are all about. Deep waters, the words of my mouth are deep waters, because that's where you see my soul. That's where you see my heart. That's where you see who I am. My words, your words are deep. You and I can make it so that there's good in that depth. I mean, you think about it. I don't mean to stretch the illustration too far, but what do you find in deep waters? Oh, you find some good stuff. Do you like sardines? Oh, I know. We don't like sardines anymore because they stink, right? You get that can and it's all oily and greasy and they smell bad and nobody wants to eat sardines. But do you know how many people in the world live off the fish that the ocean provide, the sea, the deep waters of the sea? And when you get that oil, you go and you buy that expensive fish oil or your krill oil, you start doing a little research, all the stuff that has the oil in it that your heart needs, it's so good, got those omega-3s and omega-6s, or whatever number it is that makes it good for you. Those are creatures that live in the deep part of the sea. My words are my deep waters. Your words are your deep waters. Let your words feed people and provide things that are good for people all the time, because it's something we've got to pay attention to. When Paul wrote this to the Colossians, this text that Christian read for us, you know how much trouble there was in the first century, because the gospel was new and people hadn't heard it, and the world was steeped in idolatry and paganism and heathenism. And so Paul writes to the church at Colossae, just like every other city in the Mediterranean that had its temples and its idol practices and temples and the carved images that people went to, and the practices, the sensual and immoral practices that people used to worship those gods. This is the world that Paul wrote this to the church in, as if this would make a difference. And he wrote it as if it would make a difference, because it will make a difference. Chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, what Christian read for us just a little bit ago. Conduct yourselves with wisdom toward outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. Do you ever think of the times you are with people who are not in the church as opportunities? What would happen if we started thinking of those times as opportunities? Make the most of your opportunities. Conduct yourselves with wisdom toward outsiders, making the most of opportunities. Well, how do you do that? Let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. Paul is talking about being deliberate. I think that's one of the first things we need to understand about our speech. It's got to be deliberate. And as we bring this lesson to its close this morning, I want to talk to you about deliberacy. Deliberacy, making a determination in your mind and in your heart to be deliberate in what you say. Not just blurt out things. What did Solomon say? In a multitude of words, there lacks not transgression, there lacks not sin. So however many words you speak, make sure that all of them are deliberate words. Think about them beforehand. Make plans. You know you're going to be with people who are not members of the church. Think about what you might say and how you might impact their thinking. And be salt and be light. He says, let your speech be with grace, as though seasoned with salt. And Jesus said, you be salt, you be light. This is how we do it, oftentimes in the world. We're with people who are outside of Christ and they're lost. And Paul is saying, see that as an opportunity and use your speech to impact their lives. Number 2, we're talking about here opportunities with people who are outsiders. But what about in the home? What about while we're at home? There's so much danger at home. Why is there danger at home when it comes to what we say? Because we're so familiar with each other and we tend to take each other for granted that sometimes we'll say things at home that we would never say to anybody who's a stranger. We'll be ugly and hateful and mean to people we love because they'll take it. We never do that to strangers. Have you ever done this? You're in your house, and then the phone rings. Oh, hello, how are you? It's like, what? Yeah, because you would never answer the phone and go, well, I don't know, maybe you would. Maybe you get those spam calls, because now it tells us who's calling sometimes you go. But you see what we do? If this is true, and do you think it's true? Let it be true at home. Let what comes out of our mouths in our homes be edifying, be building up, be kind and nice and respectful. Sometimes that's what we miss in our homes. We just take each other for granted and we stop having respect enough to take the time and the effort to say things that are as good as they could be. Well, I think that's important. And number 3, use what you have. You have a voice, that's most obvious, to say things. But what else do we have besides a voice? You've got a phone. You can text people messages. And you can lift them up by your texts if you want to. You have a computer. Probably everybody's got a computer. Well, if you've got a phone, you've got a computer. You might be on Facebook. You might be on some... it used to be, I remember when email was new? Ooh, email. Anybody used to be on MySpace? Yeah, see, we're going way back now. Way back. Oh, that was 5 or 10 years ago. Yeah, way back. Yeah. Technology has changed us, hasn't it? But when you post something on Facebook, post something that'll lift people up. Post something that'll help people. Post something that'll encourage people. When you respond, and this is what I had to learn because when it was new, when I was on there, I wasn't going to get a Facebook thing. And the girl said, oh, Dad, you need to have a Facebook thing. And they fixed me up a Facebook page, and now I'm on Facebook, and I didn't even know it. Oh, man. So I start responding to people, and boy, there's opportunity to lambaste those idiots on there. You see? Because they don't even know who I am. They can't even see me. They can't touch me. I'm just here on a keyboard. I'm like the mystery attacker, whatever. Well, not really, because your name's on there. But we know our name's on everything. Our words are our deep waters. Our words come from our hearts. Our words need to be deliberate, and they need to be as godly as they can be, and they need to be fitting for every situation. When I say godly, I don't mean religious all the time. I just mean in keeping with what God would have us to say to each other. That's all I mean by that. And there's another thing we have. It's pen and paper. It's old-fashioned, isn't it? Pen and paper. But I know this from my own experience. People can tell me something, and I really appreciate a kind word, an encouraging word. But when they take the time to write a note, it's like, wow, that's special. And I've got, you know how it is when you're going through your desk and your drawers and you're clearing things out, and I got to throw that. I've had this long enough. I'll throw it away. I come to those cards and I can't throw them away. Because I'll read them anew and say, oh, I can't believe they said, oh, that's so nice, so sweet. And it's 10, 20, 25 years old, but it still does my heart good to read that message that they took the time to write down to me, for me, whatever. So words, they're powerful. They tend to do a lot of harm in this world, but you and I, we can make the difference. We can make the change. We can set about deliberately to say things from here on out to make 2022 a year of godly words or God-approved words, where you can set apart time right now to work on your heart. Get your heart right. What did Paul say when he was finishing up that letter to the church to the Philippi? So whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, whatever things are pure, what do you do with those things? He said, think on these things. Think on those things, and that'll help your heart get so right. Well, this is the lesson this morning. I hope it's been beneficial to you. It's not typically the one you would think it would be the day after Christmas, is it? But I think these things are going to help me in the new year to be more deliberate with my words, with my speech, and the things that I say, so that I can build people up and carry people through in some dark times. That's what I'm thinking. Well, there is a word that God has given us, and that word is His gospel. And if you have never obeyed His gospel, then we want to invite you this morning to let us know how we can help you obey that gospel. It's a simple plan. Put your faith in Jesus Christ, repent of your sin, confess His name, and then somebody will lower you into water and raise you back up to walk in newness of life. If you need our prayers, we're here for you. Just let us know how we can help by coming forward while we sing the song of encouragement and invitation that's been selected.